On a warm June evening in 2013, a father of 5 stepped into the wilderness of Colorado's ancient canyons and vanished without a trace. 7 years later, searchers finally found what was left of him. His skeleton lay deep inside a forbidden section of wilderness where nobody was supposed to be. Beside the bones was his destroyed phone, shattered by years of rain, snow, and brutal heat. But somehow the memory card inside still worked, and the final image stored on that card has never been publicly explained, because standing between the trees, less than 30 yards away from Dale Stelling, was a tall, dark figure watching him. Then investigators listened to the videos. 3 separate whistles echoed through the forest around him, answering each other from different directions, and whatever was surrounding Dale that night never let him come home. Dale Stelling was 51 years old, a husband, a father, the kind of man people depended on when life became difficult. Friends described him as stubborn in the best way possible, quiet, reliable, tough beyond reason. Years of back surgeries had permanently damaged his posture, leaving him with a painful, uneven walk. But according to his family, Dale refused to let pain define him. He kept working, kept helping people, kept showing up. In June of 2013, Dale and his family were traveling through the American Southwest in an RV. It was supposed to be a peaceful road trip through some of the most beautiful landscapes in the country. But during the trip, the RV broke down near Mesa Verde National Park. While repairs were being handled, the family decided to explore the park. At first, everything felt normal. Tourists moved through the trails. Families visited the ancient cliff dwellings carved into the canyon walls centuries earlier. Rangers guided visitors through the ruins left behind by the ancestral Pueblo people. Then Dale noticed something in the distance. Far above the canyon, hidden against the cliffs, sat an isolated stone structure most tourists never even noticed. And for reasons nobody could explain, Dale became obsessed with reaching it. Around 4:30 p.m., he told his wife Denian he wanted to hike there alone. She offered him water before he left. Dale declined. He said he'd be back soon. That decision would become one of the last conversations they ever had. Instead of taking the safer tourist route, Dale chose a difficult, isolated loop trail known for steep drops, unstable footing, and dangerous canyon edges. One wrong step in certain sections could send a hiker hundreds of feet into the rocks below. At some point during the hike, another tourist unknowingly captured a photograph of Dale standing along the trail. It would become the last confirmed image of him alive. Moments later, he disappeared around a bend in the canyon path and was never seen again. But to understand what may have happened to Dale Stelling, you first need to understand the place where he vanished. Because Mesa Verde is not an ordinary national park. The land stretches across tens of thousands of acres filled with twisting canyons, hidden ravines, dense forest, and ancient ruins abandoned centuries ago. Long before modern visitors arrived, the ancestral Pueblo people lived there for generations, building entire communities directly into the cliffs themselves. But alongside the ruins, they also left behind strange warnings. Carved into stone walls across the region are towering humanoid figures covered in dark hair, standing over much smaller human beings. Different tribes across North America told similar stories. Some called them wild men, others called them forest giants. Today, most people know the legend by another name, Bigfoot. But unlike modern pop culture, many tribal traditions didn't describe these beings as harmless creatures wandering the woods. They described them as territorial, dangerous, predatory, and according to some of the oldest stories, they communicated through whistling, not random sounds, specific patterns, melodic calls moving between different locations in the forest. The stories warned that hearing whistles from multiple directions at once meant something was tracking you, something trying to confuse your sense of direction, slowly pulling you deeper into isolated territory. For centuries, those stories remained buried inside folklore. Then Dale Stelling walked into those canyons alone. About an hour after leaving, Denian tried calling him. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. At first, park staff assumed he had simply lost track of time. That happens often in large wilderness areas. But as the sun began disappearing behind the canyon walls, panic started setting in. Denian contacted authorities. What followed became one of the largest search operations the park had ever seen. Ground teams searched miles of rugged terrain. K-9 units swept through the forest. Helicopters scanned the cliffs from above. Specialized rescue crews descended into deep crevices where bodies could remain hidden for years. For 2 straight weeks, investigators combed through the canyon searching for any sign of Dale Stelling. They found absolutely nothing. No footprints. No backpack. No clothing. No body. Not even evidence he had fallen. It was as if the wilderness had erased him completely. Months later, cadaver dogs were brought back into the area to search again. Still nothing. Veteran investigators admitted they had never seen a disappearance quite like it. People go missing in wilderness parks every year. But this case felt different, because normally nature leaves clues behind. Mesa Verde left none. And as months turned into years, Dale Stelling slowly became another unsolved disappearance buried inside America's wilderness. For 7 years, his wife and children lived without answers. No funeral, no explanation, no closure, just silence. Until one phone call changed everything. On September 17, 2020, 7 years after Dale Stelling vanished, authorities received a shocking report. An anonymous hiker claimed they had discovered human skeletal remains deep inside a remote canyon area near Mesa Verde National Park. The location immediately raised questions. Because the remains weren't found near a public trail, they weren't near any campsite, and they weren't even inside an area visitors were legally allowed to enter. The bones were discovered deep inside a restricted archaeological zone, a section of wilderness completely closed to the public for decades. That's why the hiker refused to identify themselves. Investigators rushed to the site. Scattered across the dry Colorado earth were weathered human bones. Nearby sat a pair of glasses, an ID card, and a destroyed cell phone. The remains belonged to Dale Stelling. After 7 years, his family finally had an answer. But the discovery only created an even darker mystery, because somehow inside that ruined phone, the memory card had survived. Rain, snow, freezing winters, brutal summer heat. 7 years of exposure, and the data was still readable. Investigators powered the phone on. At first, the contents looked ordinary. Trail photographs, canyon views, rock formations, the kinds of pictures any tourist might take during a hike. But then the sequence changed. One image showed a massive uprooted tree lying across the forest floor. Not snapped by a storm, not naturally fallen. The entire root system appeared violently ripped from the ground with incredible force. Another image showed something even stranger. A giant footprint pressed deep into wet earth beside a stream. 5 toes, broad shape, far larger than any known human track. And investigators later noticed something disturbing. The prints surrounding Dale's skeletal remains years later appeared nearly identical. Same shape, same size, same strange depth in the soil. As the photos continued, investigators realized Dale had wandered far beyond the marked trails. He was moving deeper into swampy terrain and thick forest areas visitors were never supposed to enter. Then they checked the timestamps. Earlier photos were spaced minutes apart. Calm. Normal. But as daylight faded, the pace changed dramatically. The gaps between images became shorter and shorter, almost frantic, like someone trying desperately to document everything around them before it was too late. Then came the final photograph. Time-stamped around 7:30 p.m. The forest was almost completely dark, and standing between the trees ahead of Dale was a figure. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark, completely upright. It appeared partially covered in thick hair or shadow, blending into the forest around it. The figure stood motionless roughly 30 yards away, watching him. That image has never received an official explanation, but the videos found on Dale's phone disturbed investigators even more. The first clip begins in near darkness. The forest canopy blocks almost all remaining light from the sky above. Dale's breathing is heavy as the camera shakes violently through the trees. You can hear him stumbling over roots and loose rock. And then something becomes immediately noticeable. The silence. No insects, no birds, no wind. Nothing. Just Dale breathing. Then suddenly, a whistle echoes from somewhere deep in the woods to his left. Clear. Melodic. Intentional. Not random noise. Not wind. The sound rises and falls in a deliberate pattern. Then a second whistle answers from another direction. Then a third. One to the left. One to the right, one somewhere behind him. Different positions, different tones, moving around him. Whatever was making those sounds wasn't stationary. It was coordinating, And every time Dale changed direction, the whistles shifted with him, maintaining distance while surrounding his position from multiple sides. According to several Native American legends tied to the region, this exact behavior was considered a warning sign. Some traditions described the whistles as a hunting tactic, a way to confuse isolated travelers and force them deeper into dangerous territory. Modern researchers studying alleged Bigfoot encounters have documented eerily similar reports across North America. People hearing coordinated whistles from multiple directions, then rocks thrown nearby, then pursuit, and in some cases, disappearances. Dale's recordings appeared to follow that exact sequence. Because the second video was even worse. The camera shakes violently as Dale crashes through thick undergrowth. He's breathing harder now, panicked, exhausted. You can hear branches snapping around him. At one point, he turns the camera behind himself, and for a split second, something moves between the trees. A tall, dark shape, humanoid. Its arms appeared unnaturally long compared to its body, and it wasn't wandering randomly through the forest. It seemed to be following him, matching his direction, closing distance whenever he slowed down. Then it happened. A loud crash exploded beside him. A rock slammed into the water near Dale with terrifying force, sending water across the frame. Dale shouted in pure panic. Not confusion, not surprise, fear. The kind of fear someone experiences when they suddenly realize something is hunting them. Seconds later, the video cuts to black. That was the final recording ever recovered from Dale Stelling's phone. No more photographs. No more calls. No more videos. Only silence. Somewhere in those ancient canyons, Dale Stelling disappeared into the darkness, and whatever followed him never appeared again. After investigators reviewed the evidence, officials released their conclusion. According to the official explanation, Dale Stelling simply became disoriented, wandered off trail, and eventually died from dehydration and exposure inside the wilderness. On paper, it sounded reasonable. He had no water, no flashlight, no survival gear, and his chronic back problems would have made difficult terrain even more dangerous. But there was one problem investigators could never fully explain: the distance. Based on the timestamps recovered from Dale's phone, he traveled nearly 6 miles between the moment he left the trail and the time of his final recording. That may not sound impossible until you understand the terrain. Mesa Verde's backcountry is brutal. Sharp canyon drops, dense forest, steep rocky slopes, unmarked ravines. Even experienced hikers struggle to move quickly through those areas during daylight with proper supplies. Dale crossed that terrain in roughly 3 hours, in fading light. With no water, no navigation equipment, and a damaged back that already affected the way he walked on flat ground. Investigators calculated that he was moving at an unusually fast pace for someone in his physical condition. Too fast. Because by every reasonable estimate, Dale Stelling was not calmly hiking through those canyons. He was running. And if he was running, the obvious question becomes terrifying. What was chasing him? The deeper investigators looked into the case, the stranger it became. Why were there massive unidentified footprints surrounding his remains? Why did the search teams fail to find even a single trace of him for 7 years? Why was his body located inside a forbidden restricted zone nobody was supposed to access? And why did park authorities refuse to publicly release large portions of the investigation? To this day, officials have never fully explained the recordings recovered from Dale's phone. The whistles, the figure in the trees, the rock thrown from the darkness. None of it appears in detail within public reports. Some believe the answer is simple: a lost hiker, fear, darkness, exhaustion. The human brain can misinterpret almost anything under extreme stress, but others aren't convinced, because the stories surrounding those canyons existed long before Dale Stelling ever disappeared there. For generations, tribal legends warned people about something living deep inside isolated wilderness areas. Something territorial, something intelligent, something that watched from the trees. And according to those old stories, you would hear the whistles first. Even stranger, similar reports continue surfacing across North America today. Hunters describing strange vocalizations in remote forests. Campers reporting rocks thrown into campsites from unseen locations. Hikers claiming they were followed for miles by something moving just beyond sight. Most of those stories are dismissed immediately, but every once in a while, one case leaves behind evidence difficult to ignore. Dale Stelling's case became one of those cases. Because unlike ordinary wilderness disappearances, this one left behind recordings, photographs, a timeline, and one final message. When investigators recovered Dale's phone, they discovered an unsent text draft written during his final hours. It was addressed to his wife. The message read, "I might not make it back. Take care of the family." Those words devastated everyone who knew him. Even at the very end, injured, exhausted, and completely alone inside the wilderness, Dale's final thoughts were still about protecting the people he loved. That was who he was. A father trying to stay strong until the very last moment. Today, Dale Stelling's death officially remains unresolved. No confirmed cause of death was ever publicly established. And somewhere inside the ancient canyons of Mesa Verde National Park, the mystery still lingers. Because if Dale truly died alone in those forests, then what exactly was standing between the trees in his final photograph? What was whistling back and forth through the darkness around him? And why did a man with years of pain and limited mobility suddenly run 6 miles across one of the harshest landscapes in Colorado? Moments before he vanished forever. Maybe there's a logical explanation hidden somewhere in those canyons. Or maybe the ancestral people who carved warnings into those cliffs centuries ago were trying to tell us something humanity was never meant to forget. Some places in this world still hold secrets, and sometimes those secrets watch back.